or a car perhaps, because she's all about the sell job. She knows that very much that her probably a professional career as a sportswoman is only a finite amount, so she's absolutely making the most of it. And of course, being in an American media ecosystem, she obviously has a lot more of an advantage than other sports people around the world. So, you know,
she knows how to mix it up with the fans, and she knows how to use social media to grab attention.
Absolutely, yeah. She's probably been one of the most effective uses of social media for the sport in general. She's managed to get a big following in the US, which is obviously a market that rugby has been trying to tap into for a long, long time through traditional means, and that includes the All Blacks as well. So to have a female player be able to do this is really quite remarkable. Now, the rubber's going to really meet the road, though, when the ball gets kicked off tomorrow, because the Black Ferns are obviously heavy favourites for this game, and Alona's going, despite being 6 feet tall and weighing, no, I'm not getting into that, but she will have a lot of traffic coming her way from some very good Black Ferns players, and the likes of Caitlin Vahakolo, who was World Rugby's Breakthrough Player of the Year a couple of years ago, and then this year's new rising star, Braxton Sorensen-McGee, who we've talked about a lot on the show, who's made a fantastic start to her Test career. She's scored, I think, 4 tries in her first 2 games. They're going to be coming at her pretty quick, and she's going to probably have a lot of work to do on defence. But hopefully, the way that she's promoted this is going to help bring in a decent crowd. I'm going to be heading along tomorrow to see what all the fuss is about, and probably going to be watching a Black Ferns victory as well.
Okay, well, apparently this is not the only big game tomorrow, right? I mean, what's going on in Hamilton?
Yes, well, straight after this game, I'm going to have to hurry home because I'm providing live coverage of the Chiefs versus Moana Pacifica. Now, this is another big narrative this year has been Moana's rise to prominence, and this is, of course, off the back of another player who's a pretty big social media footprint as well, Ardie Savea, and they, amazingly, Moana are looking for a clean sweep of all the New Zealand teams, which, if you would say that at the start of the season, pretty unthinkable, really. So a win tomorrow night will lock in a playoff spot for Moana. It would be the first time they've ever done that. A win for the Chiefs would also mean that they go to the top of the table. It means they can hold home ground advantage for the finals. So a really big game for us. They've both named very, very strong teams for this game. Damian McKenzie obviously starting at 10 for the Chiefs. Ardie, the big name on the Moana side, but there's really, really informed players across both sides, so this is going to be a great watch. Also, over the weekend, tonight, we've got the Southern Derby, Crusaders and Highlanders, but riding on that, Crusaders pretty heavy favourites in this one. A win for them will mean that they could potentially go top of the table. The Highlanders have a very, very slim mathematical chance of making the playoffs, but they would need a lot of things to go their way. And then later on tonight, another big game. Hurricanes are over in Brisbane playing the Reds. Hurricanes are really informed, got pretty banged up last week against the Highlanders, though, lost quite a few players, but they are in very good form coming at the right end of the season. They could potentially move into the top 4. So really big weekend of Super Rugby.
When are you going to have time to lie on the couch and eat potato chips?
You know, I don't do that. You know, first off, I'm a high-performance athlete, so I wouldn't do that. But of course, you know as well as I do that I spend real weekends keeping an eye on these games, working very hard to bring all this information and live updates for you guys, so you can sit on the couch. The love. So you can sit on the couch and eat potato chips, maybe have a few drinks as well, and just enjoy the game.
We appreciate you, Jamie. That is Jamie Wall with Sport. Britain has signed a deal handing over the strategically important Chagos Islands back to Mauritius. As part of the deal, the UK will lease back its military base on the islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The US will also have access. The handover was temporarily delayed at the last minute by campaigners trying to block the agreement. Here's the BBC's Mark Aston.
The deal is done. The Prime Minister at a military base in Hertfordshire this afternoon announcing that sovereignty of the Chagos Islands has been ceded to Mauritius. Good afternoon. The first British colony to be relinquished since Hong Kong 28 years ago, the agreement sees a military base on the island leased back to the UK for 99 years at a cost of £100 million a year.
A few moments ago, I signed a deal to secure the joint UK-US base on Diego Garcia. This is absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence.
Isolated dots in the Indian Ocean, the Chagos Islands are strategically critical for the British and Americans who share a secret military facility on the island of Diego Garcia. However, the United Nations has ruled the atolls are unlawfully occupied, a decision which, although currently non-binding, convinced the UK government they needed to relinquish direct control.
This is yet another example of Labour chaos. They cannot negotiate. Whenever they negotiate, Britain loses. We should not be paying to surrender British territory to Mauritius.
But away from the politics and geopolitics, today was also briefly about people. 2 women born on Diego Garcia, but forcibly relocated by the British as babies. Women who still dream of returning to their homeland. In the early hours, a judge agreed to temporarily delay the signing ceremony, but by lunchtime, the court had ruled the deal could be done. Mark Easton from the BBC. What do you think of British justice?
Well, I think British justice, they take care of who they want, when they want. They haven't been able to rectify the wrongs they have done to us.
And now MPs must decide whether to rubber stamp the latest chapter in the story of an isolated atoll in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
And that report was from the BBC's Mark Easton. 20 to 5 now, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Or Whakaaro, do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anea Susana, mena pits kōrero.
Health Minister Simeon Brown says the budget's $1.4 billion in cost pressure funding for Health NZ is more than enough to deal with its deficit and treat more patients. Labour says the money will be eaten up by the deficit, which is set to top $1 billion this year. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused some of his country's closest allies of siding with rapists and baby killers after they criticised Israel's conduct in Gaza. Earlier this week, Britain, France and Canada condemned Israel's expanded military operation, threatening targeted sanctions if Israel did not lift aid restrictions on the Palestinian enclave. Earlier today, 90 aid trucks made it into Gaza, but the UN says much more is needed. In New South Wales, 4 people have died and several are missing amid major flooding caused by record rainfall. Heavy rains moved south overnight, affecting Sydney and Newcastle, with the Bureau of Meteorology issuing weather warnings for southern parts of the state. Auckland firefighters had to request a high-rise appliance from Hamilton today as they dealt with the blaze on the 16th floor of a central city building under construction. The Hamilton truck was eventually turned back because a road was closed and the fire on Wakefield Street, close to Queen Street, was under control. And New Zealand's first grid-connected storage battery was switched on this afternoon. Meridian says the $186 million battery park at Marsden Point in Northland can power 60,000 homes for up to 2 hours. It will store electricity when it's plentiful and release it when demand is high. Those are the latest news headlines. Our next news, sport and weather is at 5. You're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owens.
Kia ora rā e hoa. Don't just invest in stats and numbers, invest in us. That is the message from a group of teenagers grappling with some of the decisions made by the government in this year's budget. They came together today along with child advocates, researchers and other rangatahi to unpack the budget, with KiwiSaver, pay equity, employment and climate change all top of the discussion. Louise Tanous reports.
A budget is numbers, but numbers don't heal people. A budget is a promise, but promises break without action. A budget is pointless without a plan. We've heard the speeches, seen the headlines, watched the words roll in like tides, but tides that never quite reach the shore.
Save the Children, Generation Hope Youth Ambassadors opening a post-budget chat hosted by the Child Poverty Action Group and Tamaki Makoto today. Sonia is 17 years old and a youth ambassador. She was concerned about what she feels are important parts of daily life that were missing from the budget.
It was a lot about infrastructure and funding for big things, but not really the things that matter or the things that impact people on their daily lives. Kids that go to school, what are we going to do about bus fees? What are we going to do about traffic? What are we going to do about families and school lunches?
One of the big changes affecting rangatahi is the tightening of the job seeker and emergency benefits. 18 and 19-year-olds on those will now have the means tested against their parents' incomes. Year 12 students at Carlton Boys High School, Walesi and Nicolau, are concerned about this.
Do they know, like, especially in Polynesian households, like, our parents have their own struggles. Relying on them for the funding will put more stress and, more trouble on our parents.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to, the purpose of the government itself, to provide, equitable outcomes for the general public. Whether or not you have, stable parents, everybody deserves what their plan is.
The issue was of particular relevance for Walesi, whose mother has been impacted by the pay equity reform. While its overhaul will save the government $2.7 billion a year, the change means workers now face a higher threshold to prove they're underpaid due to sex discrimination. Walesi is worried about how it will affect his mum and dedicated his opening speech to her.
If my mom can't get ahead, how am I supposed to? This year's budget was meant to be about growth, but for so many families, especially those led by women, it feels more like being told to grow something from dry soil. You can't count down the people who carry the load to expect the next generation to rise. This budget forgets the people who hold our communities and our children together. Women, especially mothers.
Then there's KiwiSaver. From July, 16 and 17-year-olds are eligible to get the government contribution, and requirements for employers to match their deposits will kick in next year. But the minimum contribution will go up from 3% of wages to 4% over the next 3 years. And the amount the government is contributing is being halved to a maximum of $260 a year. The government says the increase in the default amount could leave KiwiSaver members with more than $100,000 in retirement, but the Labour Party claims not everybody will benefit, especially younger people. It claims the changes could mean an 18-year-old ends up with $66,000 less for their retirement. Walesi and Nicolau are disappointed with the change.
Finance is everything. It would be good to have that support that they're sort of half. It's still there, but there's a half really enough to start something in this ever-growing society.
Yeah, it is really disappointing. As hearing that they are cutting the KiwiSaver, work, if they want to grow economically, trying to grow, but not giving help to those in need.
The students also say there is one big thing missing in the budget, and that's addressing climate change. Instead, the government has set aside $200 million to invest in fossil fuel development at gas fields, reduced climate finance to the Pacific, and clawed back funds for government agencies working on ways to save energy. These rangatahi are aghast.
I was really, really worried, and I was really, really disappointed. We're really educated on climate change, and we know that it's one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue that we're facing right now. And I feel to disregard that entire movement, it's not even a movement, it's a reality. There needs to be a lot more infographics on that, a lot more action. We actually need to get our butts up and start moving.
Concern from a younger generation who fear they'll be worse off in the future because of today's decisions.
And that was Louise Sanus talking to Rangitaiki about yesterday's budget. It is 12 minutes away from 5 now. Te amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some people will be able to get a 12-month long prescription instead of the current 3-month maximum under changes announced in the budget. The Health Minister says it will cut costs for patients and cut paperwork that is taking health professionals away from more urgent or complex needs. Simeon Brown says the current regime creates barriers for people on stable, long-term meds like asthma inhalers, insulin for diabetes and blood pressure tablets. From early next year, 12-month prescriptions can be issued where it is safe and clinically appropriate to do so. The changes are costing $91 million over 4 years for the additional meds. The government also says that health budget funding will support the delivery of 231,000 additional general practice encounters. Joining us now is Dr. Fergus Aitchison from Three Rivers Medical, the biggest GP clinic in Gisborne. Kia ora, Fergus.
Lisa.
Prescriptions, is this a good or a bad policy?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. GPs acknowledge that there is a hassle factor in requesting a repeat prescription on a 3-monthly basis. And we're acutely aware of the costs involved in the prescription fee. reminding people that if cost is an issue for you, there is a disability allowance available to mitigate that. One concern is that the safe and clinically appropriate aspect of the announcement seems to be overshadowed a bit by the 12-month part of it. There are a number of conditions and medications where there's no way that a 12-month prescription is safe or clinically appropriate.
So, from the examples used, for example, insulin, would you see it as a common thing that you could have a prescription for 12 months?
So insulin is an interesting one. The other conditions mentioned, things like blood pressure, for example, if you have a home monitor, if you've got stable kidney function, I don't think there's many GPs who would die in a ditch for an otherwise well person having a 12-month prescription for that. Insulin treatment for diabetes is always a moving target, and the likelihood of somebody having a stable insulin dose over a 12-month period is actually quite low. The other thing that's a concern here is that there may be mission creep in all of this, that the perception that a 12-month observation of chronic disease now becomes the norm. Remember that if you're an insulin-using diabetic, we'd really like to be seeing blood sugar monitoring over the long term every 3 months or 6 at the absolute maximum. So the idea that you can simply disappear into the blue for 12 months and not have any scrutiny of what's going on in your health is one that really needs to be examined.
Will it mean less paperwork for you, less admin? Will you be freer to see more people?
Not really. If you look at the impact of repeat prescription on the GP's daily workflow, it's significant, but it probably does amount to more than the consultation time of maybe 1 or 2 patients, depending on your patient load. And remember that every time a repeat prescription is issued, what's actually taking place is a review of the safety and appropriateness of the medicines that are being administered. I think a lot of people think it's just a part of the computer prescription and charge the patient. That's not the case. There's a process that takes place of looking at the medicines list, reconciling it with secondary care, reconciling it with the pharmacy, ensuring that the appropriate monitoring is actually being done. Many of the drugs that we prescribe are toxic to liver or kidneys or bone marrow. Are those bloods up to date? Is the drug that's being prescribed still international best practice? Things can change a lot in medicine quite quickly. So that's what goes through the GP's head when they're doing repeat prescribing.
So there's one other thing that caught my eye in the Health Minister's press release was that the funding will support, overall health funding from the budget, will support 231,000 additional general practice encounters. That seemed like a big number to me, and I wondered, what's an encounter? What's your understanding here?
Well, remember that depending on how you count it, there are between 15 and 20 million GP consultations taking place in this country every year. People beavering away doing the unglamorous work that keeps our populations well. So 231,000, a remarkably specific number. I have no idea how that was calculated. Less than 1% increase. So for an average jobbing GP, that might be seeing 1 or 2 extra patients a week.
Are you concerned, Fergus, that whether that is actually in front of a GP or not? I mean, versus, say, wanting to collect a repeat prescription or dealing with a query over, the computer, now that patients can have access to sort of your health type apps and things like that. Do you interpret that to be a face-to-face?
Well, no, face-to-face is face-to-face, but I think what is happening, and we welcome it, is that we have a number of different ways of meeting people's primary care and general practice needs, one of which is a face-to-face encounter. That's not always required. It's not always the best use of the patient time or the GP's time. So that move to the patient portal that you're alluding to is actually a very efficient thing. But I don't know how that factors into the 231,000. What I do know is that general practice in this country is in an existential crisis. I do know that we're 1,400 GPs short, and I do know that there was no mention of increase in core funding for general practice. So those things are a huge concern.
I hate to do this to you when we're running out of time, Fergus, but I have to ask, how did the budget leave you feeling as a GP on the front line?
Just one further thing. There was a Maori baby boy born yesterday on budget day in this country. That baby boy has the same life expectancy as a baby boy born yesterday in Bangladesh. The budget yesterday made zero mention of equity in healthcare outcomes. That is an international embarrassment, and it's a national shame.
Does that sum up your feelings in some way, Fergus?
How long have you got, Lisa?
Not impressed.
One of the core values in general practice is equity of outcomes. There was nothing in the budget that addressed that.
Really appreciate your time, Fergus. That is Dr. Fergus Aitchison, who is from Three Rivers Medical. That's the biggest clinic, GP clinic in Gisborne. They're talking about what was in the budget and also what wasn't in the budget. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A rare love triangle involving two female ospreys and one male sharing the same nest has been captured on camera in Scotland. One of the females nested at the site last year when her previous partner failed to return. She allowed another female and a young male to move in. The BBC's Lorna Gordon has the details.
In a canopy of trees in the south of Scotland, an unusual love triangle has formed. A young male osprey, who's been named New Boy, flies in to feed two females sharing the same nest. There's lots of low-level vocalization, and as one of the female ospreys feeds, the other settles onto the four eggs to keep them warm. In a duty the two females appear to be sharing. This nesting behaviour involving a trio of ospreys is very rare. Diane Bennett from the Tweed Valley Osprey Project says the setup appears to be harmonious.
It's incredible watching them taking turns to incubate the eggs as well. We were thinking in terms of there'll be one female being more dominant than the other, but over the past couple of weeks it's hard to decide if there is a dominant female or not, or if it is quite an equal partnership.
Many of the male ospreys didn't return to the area this year, including the older female bird's previous partner, and the lack of potential mates may have driven the unusual behaviour. The eggs should hatch next week, but feeding 4 chicks and 2 female adult ospreys is a big ask, and experts will be monitoring the bird's behaviour closely via a webcam to see whether the brood survives.
And that was the BBC's Lorna Gordon there. And we've just got a flower delivery, which is the chaos in the background. Don't let it bother you. Quick bit of feedback now on butter. This person says, so butter goes from Hokitika to Auckland and is sold at Costco at vastly reduced prices. Yet here we are in Greymouth, which is the next turn over from Hokitika, this listener says, and we're paying $10 plus for a 500 gram block.